The screen of my husband's phone illuminated the darkened bedroom with an eerie blue glow. 3 little words that would destroy 10 years of marriage. Reservation confirmed. Friday. I stood frozen. The towel I'd been using to dry my hair still clutched in my hand, dripping onto the hardwood floor. For months, I'd been ignoring the signs, making excuses, telling myself I was being paranoid. But there it was. Undeniable proof staring back at me from James's unlocked phone. The sender was Rebecca Wilson, his assistant of 14 months. The same Rebecca who had sent me a Christmas card last year, who had smiled at me during the company picnic while standing too close to my husband. I don't know what possessed me to pick up James's phone that night. He was in the shower, steam billowing from beneath the bathroom door, his deep voice humming some tune I didn't recognize. Another new habit. The James I married wouldn't be caught dead singing in the shower. The message preview didn't show much, just those 3 words, but something in my gut twisted painfully. Our anniversary was the password. 10/24, October 24th, a date he claimed to cherish. How many times had he entered those digits to unlock his phone and message her? My hands trembled as I navigated to their conversation history. I'm not typically the snooping type. I teach media ethics at the university, for God's sake. I lecture my students about digital privacy every semester. But in that moment, all my principles evaporated like the steam now seeping under the bedroom door. I needed to know. What I found made my knees buckle. I sank onto the edge of our bed, the bed we'd chosen together at a quaint furniture store in Vermont during our 5th anniversary trip. I scrolled through months of messages, each one a knife twisting deeper into my chest. Casual exchanges evolved into flirtations, then explicit conversations, then plans. So many plans. Weekends I thought he was at conferences, late nights at the office. The signs had been there all along, waving frantically in my face while I deliberately looked away. "Melissa?" James's voice startled me. I hadn't heard the shower turn off. He stood in the doorway, towel wrapped around his waist, water droplets clinging to his chest, the chest I'd laid my head against nearly every night for a decade. "Everything okay?" I don't know how I did it. Some hidden reserve of strength, or perhaps pure shock, allowed me to place his phone exactly where I'd found it, screen down. I forced my lips into what I hoped resembled a smile. "Fine. Just tired. Long day of lectures." My voice sounded strange, distant, as if someone else was speaking through me. "You work too hard," he said, reaching for his moisturizer. Another new habit, this careful grooming routine that had appeared in the last year. For her. "Why don't you take a long bath? I'll finish up some emails." Emails. Right. That night was the first of my silent vigil. While James slept beside me, his breathing deep and untroubled, I stared at the ceiling, mentally cataloging every suspicious moment from the past year. The unexplained business trips, the new cologne, the gym membership he actually used, the late-night texts he'd shielded from my view, the sudden interest in his wardrobe. It was like watching a movie of my life with the contrast turned up, every suspicious detail now vibrant and obvious. I didn't confront him the next day, or the day after. For 3 agonizing days, I lived a double life. Professor Melissa Adams by day, teaching advertising principles to eager undergraduates, smiling at colleagues, grading papers. By night, I became a detective, meticulously documenting my husband's betrayal while he slept obliviously beside me. On the second night, while James took a work call on the patio, with her, I now knew, I used his laptop. He'd left it open. Another careless mistake born of comfort in his deception. Their emails were more formal, but no less damning. They'd been planning a trip to Cabo San Lucas next month, disguised as a business conference. They'd looked at apartments together. She'd sent him listings, and he'd responded with his preferences. They were planning a life. My replacement was already selected, waiting in the wings. I learned she was 27, 5 years younger than James, 3 years younger than me. I found her social media profiles, each carefully curated to present an aspiring professional woman. In one photo, she stood beside an attractive man, her arm around his waist. "Date night with the hubby. Blessed," read the caption. His name was Daniel Matthews, according to her profile, an architect specializing in urban planning. They'd been married for 4 years, so she was cheating too. This revelation should have offered some bitter comfort. Misery loves company, after all. But it only made me feel hollow. Another marriage poisoned, another unsuspecting spouse going about his life, trusting the woman he loved, while she betrayed him in the most intimate way possible. The third night was when I formed my plan. I wasn't going to scream or throw things or leave tearful voicemails. I wasn't going to be the hysterical wife, the woman scorned. No, I would be methodical, precise. I would orchestrate a reckoning. First, I needed more information. The reservation confirmed message mentioned Friday, 2 days away. I knew the time and place now. 7:30 at AITA, one of the most exclusive restaurants downtown. The kind with private booths and discreet servers who pretend not to notice inappropriate touches under the table. James had taken me there once for our 8th anniversary. $200 per person, before wine. He'd complained about the price for weeks afterward. Apparently, Rebecca was worth the splurge. I called Aria the next morning from my office at the university. "Good morning. I'd like to make a reservation for Friday evening," I said, surprised by the steadiness of my voice. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but we're fully booked this Friday," the host replied with practiced regret. "Oh, that's disappointing," I said, infusing my voice with just the right amount of dejection. "My husband and I are celebrating our anniversary, and he mentioned wanting to try your restaurant." A small lie. My anniversary wasn't for another 5 months, if we even made it that far. The host hesitated. "Let me check again. We do have a cancellation at 7:15. It's not one of our better tables, I'm afraid, near the kitchen entrance." "Perfect. That sounds wonderful, actually. We don't mind a bit of bustle." I gave them my name, my maiden name, Williams, not Adams, and confirmed the reservation. Next, I needed to contact Daniel Matthews. This was trickier, but as a university professor, I had resources. I found his professional profile easily enough. He'd recently completed a project revitalizing an old industrial district downtown. His firm's website featured a professional headshot, dark hair, kind eyes, a serious expression. He looked like a good man. He didn't deserve this, any more than I did. I crafted an email from my university account, professional and straightforward. I explained that I was organizing a panel discussion on urban renewal for my advanced advertising students, focusing on successful campaigns that had revitalized neglected areas. His recent project made him an ideal speaker. Would he be interested in participating? Perhaps we could discuss the details over dinner. This Friday, perhaps, at Aria around 7:15. It was bold, possibly reckless, but something told me he would accept. People in committed relationships rarely suspect they're being manipulated because they don't expect the world to be organized against them. That's the advantage faithless people exploit, the trusting nature of those who love them. His response came within hours. He was flattered by the invitation and had been looking for opportunities to discuss the project with the academic community. Friday at Aria would be perfect. His wife had mentioned having dinner with colleagues that evening anyway. Colleagues. Is that what she called my husband? I spent Thursday in a fog, moving through my lectures on autopilot. My students didn't seem to notice, or if they did, they attributed it to the end-of-semester fatigue that affects even the most enthusiastic professors. I caught my reflection in the window during my evening class. I looked normal, put together, professional in my navy blazer and pencil skirt. No one would guess I was planning an ambush. That night, James told me he had a late meeting on Friday. Client dinner, very important. Couldn't reschedule. He might be home quite late. Don't wait up. I nodded, murmured understanding words, kissed his cheek. The performance of a lifetime. "You're the best," he said, pulling me close. "I don't deserve you." For once, we agreed on something. Friday dawned bright and clear, a beautiful spring day that mocked my inner turmoil. I dressed with particular care. A deep burgundy dress that James had always liked, hair falling in soft waves past my shoulders, makeup subtle but flawless. I looked good, strong, the image of a woman who wouldn't be broken by betrayal. I arrived at AITA 15 minutes early. The host led me to my table, indeed near the kitchen, but with a perfect view of the private booths along the far wall. I ordered a sparkling water and waited, my heart hammering so loudly I was certain other diners could hear it. Daniel arrived precisely on time. He was taller than his photograph suggested, his suit well-tailored but not flashy. He spotted me immediately. I'd sent a professional headshot with my follow-up email and approached with a genuine smile. "Professor Williams?" he asked, extending his hand. I stood to shake it. "Please, call me Melissa," I said. "Thank you so much for coming." We ordered drinks and made small talk. He was articulate, passionate about his work, easy to talk to under different circumstances. I might have enjoyed his company. As it was, I could barely focus, my eyes constantly drifting to the entrance. At 7:25, they arrived. James in his best suit, the one he'd bought for client meetings last month. Rebecca beside him, elegant in a black dress, her hand resting lightly on his arm in a gesture of practiced intimacy. The host led them to one of the private booths, partially concealed by decorative screens, but still visible from my strategic position. "Are you all right?" Daniel asked, noticing my sudden tension. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "I'm fine," I said, taking a long sip of water. "Just remembered something I forgot to mention to my teaching assistant." I directed the conversation back to his work, asking detailed questions that required lengthy answers, giving me time to observe. They were so at ease with each other, so comfortable. James poured wine for her, their fingers brushing. She laughed at something he said, touching his arm. They studied their menus side by side, rather than across from each other. The seating arrangement of lovers, not colleagues. "Excuse me for a moment," I said to Daniel after we'd ordered our entrees. "I need to use the restroom." I timed my path perfectly, walking slowly past their booth. James's back was to me, but Rebecca faced outward. Our eyes met for the briefest moment, a flash of recognition, quickly replaced by confusion, then alarm. She knew who I was. We'd met at company functions, exchanged pleasantries while standing on opposite sides of my husband. Now here I was, witnessing her in the role she thought was secret. I continued to the restroom, locked myself in a stall, and took several deep breaths. This was really happening. They were really here, celebrating their affair over expensive wine, while their spouses sat elsewhere in the same restaurant. The audacity was breathtaking. When I returned to the table, Daniel was checking his phone. "Sorry," he said, putting it away. "My wife texted to check in. She's having dinner with colleagues tonight, too." I took a deep breath. "Daniel," I said quietly, "I haven't been entirely honest with you about why I asked you here tonight." His expression shifted, wariness replacing the easy openness from before. "What do you mean?" "My name isn't Williams. It's Adams. Melissa Adams." I watched his face, waiting for recognition. It didn't come. "My husband is James Adams. He works at North Star Marketing." Daniel frowned slightly. "I'm sorry. Should I know him?" "He's having dinner right now, in this restaurant, with your wife, Rebecca." The color drained from his face. That's not possible. Rebecca is having dinner with her team. They're planning the Johnson account launch." I shook my head slowly. "They've been having an affair for almost a year, Daniel. I found out 3 days ago." His hands gripped the edge of the table, knuckles white. "This isn't funny." "No," I agreed. "It isn't." I nodded toward the private booth. "They're right over there if you want to see for yourself." Daniel's eyes followed my gesture, his expression a battlefield of disbelief and dawning horror. This can't be happening. he whispered, more to himself than to me, his gaze fixed on the partially obscured booth where our spouses sat, oblivious to the reckoning that awaited them. "I'm sorry," I said, and I meant it. Despite orchestrating this moment, I took no pleasure in his pain. I found out on Tuesday night. James left his phone unlocked, and I saw a message from her about tonight's reservation. He turned back to me, his eyes haunted. Why like this? Why not just tell me privately? It was a fair question. One I'd asked myself repeatedly over the past 72 hours. Because I needed to see it with my own eyes, I admitted. And I thought you deserved to see it too. No gaslighting, no chance for them to coordinate their lies or delete their messages. Just the truth, ugly as it is. Daniel ran a hand through his dark hair, a gesture of distress that made him look suddenly vulnerable. 10 years, he said quietly. We've been together since college. 4 years married. He glanced toward the booth again. I thought we were happy. The rawness in his voice struck a chord. 10 years for us, too, I said. I found apartment listings in his email. They've been planning a future together. His head snapped up. What? I nodded, swallowing hard. They put a deposit down on a place in Riverdale last month. Riverdale, he repeated numbly. We looked at houses there last year. Rebecca said it was too far from her office. A hollow laugh escaped me before I could stop it. Apparently, the commute is worth it for James. Our appetizers arrived, a cruel joke, beautifully plated food that neither of us could stomach. The waiter, sensing the tension, quickly retreated after refilling our water glasses. What do we do now? Daniel asked, his voice steadier but still strained. I took a sip of water, gathering my courage. That depends. Do you want to confront them? Yes. No hesitation. Right now. I understood his urgency. The need to act, to do something, anything, to regain control in a situation where we'd been rendered powerless. But rushing in would be a mistake. Let's wait until they've ordered, I suggested. Get comfortable. Really settle in. I glanced at my watch. Give them 15 more minutes to enjoy their date. Daniel looked at me with new respect, perhaps recognizing the cold calculation behind my composure. You've thought this through. I've had 3 days to plan while pretending everything was normal. I pushed my untouched appetizer aside. 3 days of sleeping beside him, making his coffee, kissing him goodbye in the morning, all while knowing. I spoke to Rebecca this morning before work, Daniel said, his voice hollow. She told me she loved me before she left, said she'd call during her break. He checked his phone again. She did call. Told me they were ordering dinner for the team meeting. His jaw tightened. He described the sandwich she was supposedly eating while sitting right there with him. The casual cruelty of it struck me anew. Not just the betrayal itself, but the elaborate lies, the performance of normalcy, the theft of our time and trust. My hand trembled slightly as I reached for my water glass. Are you okay? Daniel asked, noticing. No, I answered honestly. But I will be. We sat in silence for a moment, united in our parallel grief. Then I saw movement from their booth, Rebecca excusing herself, likely heading to the restroom. An opportunity. She's getting up, I said. I'm going to the restroom again. When I come back, we'll decide how to proceed. Daniel nodded, his expression hardening with resolve. I timed my path to intersect with Rebecca's, meeting her just outside the restroom door. Up close, she was even prettier than in her pictures. Young, polished, confident. She wore a delicate gold necklace I recognized. James had claimed it was for his mother's birthday last month. Rebecca, I said pleasantly, as if greeting an acquaintance at a cocktail party. She froze, eyes widening in recognition and alarm. Melissa, what are you doing here? Having dinner, I replied, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through me. Just like you, though I'm not hiding my dining companion. Her face drained of color. I don't know what you mean. I'm here with colleagues for a... Please don't, I cut her off, my smile never wavering. James is 10 feet away in that booth. I saw you arrive together. Her carefully constructed poise crumbled. Melissa, I'm not here for your explanation or apology, I interrupted again. I just wanted you to know that your husband is at my table. Daniel seems like a good man. He deserved better than this. Her eyes grew impossibly wider. Daniel is here? Where? She glanced frantically around the restaurant. Table 12, near the kitchen. He knows everything now. Rebecca's breathing quickened, panic setting in. This isn't… We weren't… Almost a year, I said, still eerily calm. The apartment in Riverdale, the planned trip to Cabo, the late nights and weekends. I know it all, Rebecca. Tears sprang to her eyes. Please, don't do this. Not here. Why not here? It's a nice restaurant. James took me here for our anniversary once. He complained about the price for weeks afterward. Apparently, you're worth the splurge. A waiter passed by, giving us a curious glance. Rebecca hastily wiped her eyes, smearing her mascara slightly. The perfect facade was cracking. What are you going to do? She whispered. I checked my watch deliberately. I'm going to return to my table. You're going to return to yours. And in about 5 minutes, we're all going to have a long overdue conversation. Leaving her standing there, I walked back to Daniel, who was watching Rebecca from across the room. Her body language as she returned to James told the whole story. Stiff movements, pale face, whispered urgent words. You spoke to her, Daniel stated, not a question. I nodded. She knows we're here. She's telling him now. I watched as James's head whipped around, scanning the restaurant with panicked eyes. When he spotted me, the blood drained from his face. I raised my glass in a mock toast, enjoying the flash of pure terror that crossed his features. Now what? Daniel asked, his voice tight with barely controlled emotion. Now we let them stew for a few minutes, I replied. Then we go over together. We watched as James and Rebecca huddled in urgent conversation. Their romantic evening shattered. James kept glancing over at us, running his hand through his hair, his own nervous tell that I recognized from a decade of marriage. They were trapped, cornered animals looking for an escape route. I can't believe they're not running for the exit, Daniel muttered. Nowhere to run, I replied. Their coats are checked. The bill hasn't come, and they know we'd just follow them anyway. After what felt like an eternity, but was probably only minutes, I stood up. Ready? Daniel rose, straightening his tie, in a gesture that seemed to help him gather his composure. As I'll ever be. We walked across the restaurant together, a united front. Other diners glanced up curiously, perhaps sensing the drama unfolding. I kept my head high, my pace measured, refusing to give anyone the satisfaction of seeing me hurry or hesitate. James stood as we approached, his face ashen. Melissa, he began, his voice strained. This isn't what it looks like? I finished for him. Please don't insult my intelligence. Or Daniel's. I gestured to the man beside me. James, this is Daniel Matthews, Rebecca's husband. Daniel, this is my husband, James Adams. The two men stared at each other, a bizarre parody of a social introduction. Rebecca remained seated, her eyes fixed on the table, shoulders hunched. Why don't we all sit down? I suggested, as if proposing a dinner party seating arrangement. I'm sure the other patrons would prefer we keep this civilized. Reluctantly, James sat back down. Daniel and I slid into the booth opposite them. The four of us faced each other across the white tablecloth, two marriages fractured beyond repair. How long have you known? James finally asked, his voice barely audible. Since Tuesday, I replied. You left your phone unlocked. Rebecca texted about tonight's reservation. He closed his eyes briefly, a flicker of recognition. And you decided to… what? Ambush us? I decided you shouldn't be the only ones making plans, I said evenly. You've had almost a year of secrecy. It seemed only fair that Daniel and I get one night of honesty. Rebecca finally looked up, her mascara smudged despite her attempts to fix it in the restroom. Daniel, I'm so sorry. This isn't… Don't. He cut her off, his voice sharp. Don't say it isn't what I think. I've seen your text messages. I know about the apartment in Riverdale. She flinched as if he'd slapped her. How could you do this? Daniel continued, struggling to keep his voice down. 10 years together, and this is how you repay my trust? With my wedding ring still on your finger? James intervened, ever the executive taking control. Look, this situation is unfortunate for everyone. We didn't mean for things to develop this way, but unfortunate, I repeated, incredulous. Is that how you describe destroying 2 marriages? An unfortunate situation? That's not what I meant, James backpedaled. Then what did you mean? I pressed. Please, enlighten us. Explain how sleeping with your assistant while your wife waits at home is unfortunate. Explain how planning a future with another man's wife is just an awkward circumstance. The waiter approached our table, sensed the tension, and wisely retreated without a word. We fell in love, Rebecca said softly, tears streaming down her face. We didn't plan it. Daniel laughed, a harsh sound devoid of humor. Love? Is that what you call it? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like cowardice. If you wanted out of our marriage, you could have said so. Instead, you lied to my face every single day. I didn't want to hurt you, she whispered. Congratulations on your failure, he replied coldly. James tried again. We were going to tell you both, after the North Star merger completed next month. The timing just wasn't right. The timing? I interjected. You were waiting for a convenient time to blow up our lives? How considerate. The reality of their betrayal sat heavy between us. Not just the affair itself, but the calculated nature of it. The planning, the apartment viewings, the lies told with straight faces and unwavering eyes. What do you want? James finally asked, his tone resigned. Money? The house? The question caught me off guard. Is that what you think this is about? A shakedown? Then why do it like this? He hissed, gesturing around the restaurant. Why not just confront me at home? Because you don't deserve privacy, I said simply. You forfeited that right when you conducted your affair in public. Restaurants, hotels, weekend trips, all places where anyone could have seen you. Did you ever think about that? Did you ever worry about humiliating me? He had no answer. Rebecca turned to Daniel, reaching for his hand across the table. He pulled away, as if her touch might burn him. Can we please go somewhere private to talk about this? Please, Danny. The nickname seemed to cut him deeper than anything else. Don't call me that, he said quietly. Not now. James looked at me, really looked at me for the first time that evening. What happens now, Melissa? It was the question I'd been asking myself for 3 days. What did I want? Revenge? Closure? A miraculous repair of what had been broken? The answer came to me with sudden clarity. Now I go home and pack your things, I said. You can pick them up tomorrow while I'm at my sister's. I'll have the locks changed by Monday. His face registered genuine shock. You're not even willing to discuss this? 10 years of marriage, and you're just done? You were done long before tonight, I replied. You just didn't have the decency to tell me. Daniel stood abruptly. I need some air. He threw his napkin on the table and walked out without a backward glance. Rebecca half rose to follow him, then sank back down, seemingly uncertain what to do. Go after him if you want, I said to her, but don't expect a warm reception. She remained seated, tears flowing freely now. We never meant for this to happen. And yet, you made dozens of deliberate choices that led exactly here, I pointed out. Every lie, every secret meeting, every time you looked our spouses in the eye and said you loved them while planning a life with someone else. James reached for my hand. I pulled away. Melissa, please, we can work through this. Couples therapy, a fresh start, whatever you need. For a brief, weak moment, I almost considered it. The familiar touch of his hand, the face I'd woken up to for a decade, the shared history, the inside jokes, the comfortable routines. But then I remembered the apartment listings, the future they'd planned without me. There's nothing to work through, I said, rising from the table. It's already over. You just didn't bother to tell me. I walked away, leaving them sitting there with their expensive wine and their shattered deception. I passed Daniel outside, standing under the restaurant's awning, staring vacantly at the street. "I'm leaving," I told him. "Do you need a ride somewhere?" He shook his head. "I think I'll walk for a while. Clear my head." I understood. "Take care of yourself, Daniel." "You too, Melissa." We parted as strangers bound by shared tragedy, each heading into an uncertain future neither of us had planned for. I walked to my car with my head high, refusing to let the tears fall until I was safely inside, with the doors locked and the engine running. Only then did I allow myself to break, sobs racking my body as I gripped the steering wheel like a lifeline. 10 years of love and trust rendered meaningless in a single evening. A future evaporated. A husband lost, not to death or disaster, but to the most banal of betrayals. He simply wanted someone else more. I cried until I had nothing left, then wiped my eyes, fixed my makeup using the rearview mirror, and drove home to begin the process of dismantling the life I'd built with James Adams. I didn't expect the silence to be so loud. Our home, my home now, echoed with emptiness as I moved from room to room, gathering James's belongings. 10 years of marriage reduced to suitcases and boxes stacked by the front door. Suits he'd worn to countless dinners and meetings. Books we'd discussed over Sunday morning coffee. The vintage watch I'd given him for our 5th anniversary. Each item carried memories I couldn't bear to examine too closely. James had called 17 times since I'd left the restaurant. I let each call go to voicemail, unable to stomach hearing his voice, his excuses, his pleas. Around midnight, the texts started coming. At first apologetic, then increasingly desperate. "Please, come home. We need to talk. I made a terrible mistake. 10 years means something, Melissa. Don't throw it away. Where are you? I'm worried." I finally responded with a single message. "I'm at home. Your things will be packed by tomorrow. Come get them between 2 and 4. I won't be here." His reply came instantly. "We need to talk face to face." "No, we don't," I typed back. "There's nothing left to say." I silenced my phone after that, continuing the grim task of excavating him from my life. In the master bathroom, I swept his toiletries into a bag. The expensive shaving cream, the cologne I'd once loved but now made my stomach turn. I found a receipt in his DOP kit for a hotel in Chicago from a weekend he'd claimed to be at a marketing conference in Denver. Another lie to add to the collection. In his nightstand drawer, beneath a stack of technology magazines, I found a small velvet box. My heart stuttered painfully. Had he been planning some romantic gesture to cover his guilt? But when I opened it, I found a pair of delicate pearl earrings. Not my style at all. They were meant for her. I snapped the box shut and buried it in a suitcase. Around 3 in the morning, exhaustion finally overcame me. I collapsed onto our bed, my bed now, still fully dressed, too drained to even remove my makeup. Sleep came in fitful bursts, punctuated by moments of stunning clarity when I'd remember. My marriage was over. The future I'd planned no longer existed. I was alone. Dawn brought no relief. I showered mechanically, watching mascara-stained water swirl down the drain. In the kitchen, I automatically reached for 2 coffee mugs before catching myself. Just one now. I would need to unlearn a decade of habits. My sister Catherine arrived at 9, letting herself in with her spare key. She took one look at me and the packed bags by the door and pulled me into a fierce hug. "You should have called me last night," she scolded gently. "You shouldn't have been alone." "I needed to be," I said, my voice rough from crying and lack of sleep. "I needed to start getting used to it." Catherine surveyed the living room, taking in the methodical dismantling of my marriage. "You're really done," she observed. Not a question. "Completely," I confirmed. "Good." She squeezed my shoulder. "He doesn't deserve a second chance, Mel." My phone buzzed with another text from James. I ignored it. "He's been calling and messaging non-stop," I told her. "I've told him to pick up his things this afternoon. I don't want to be here when he comes." "That's why I'm here," Catherine said, already moving toward the kitchen to make fresh coffee. "I'll supervise the pickup. You can go to my place. The kids are with Robert's parents this weekend. Tituchi, the reality of having to rebuild my life from scratch suddenly overwhelmed me. Where would I live? Our house had too many memories, too many ghosts. Could I afford to keep it on my professor's salary? Should I even want to? The thought of navigating real estate and mortgages alone made me dizzy. I don't know what I'm going to do, I admitted, a tremor in my voice. Catherine's expression softened. You don't have to know today, or tomorrow, or next week. Right now, you just need to breathe. We spent the morning sorting through practicalities. Credit cards to cancel, joint accounts to separate, names to remove from emergency contacts. The granular details of disentanglement that no one tells you about when your marriage implodes. Catherine made notes, offered to call our family attorney, brewed more coffee when mine went cold. At 1:30, I packed an overnight bag and prepared to leave before James arrived. As I gathered my laptop and phone charger, I noticed something on the kitchen counter. James's anniversary gift to me last year, a small digital photo frame loaded with our favorite memories, camping in Colorado, New Year's Eve in Times Square, building sand castles on the beach in Puerto Rico, a decade of smiling faces, of a happiness I now questioned. Had he been thinking of her even then? How long had our marriage been a performance? I unplugged the frame and tucked it into a drawer, unable to look at it, but equally unable to throw it away. These small decisions felt monumental. What to keep, what to discard, what to hide away until the pain dulled enough to revisit. Catherine drove me to her house in the suburbs, filling the car ride with gentle chatter about her kids' soccer games and the new landscaping she was planning. Normal, everyday topics that had nothing to do with betrayal or broken vows. I was grateful for the distraction, for the glimpse of a world still turning despite my personal cataclysm. The guest room is all made up, she said, as we pulled into her driveway. Stay as long as you need. Just for the weekend, I insisted. I need to face this head-on. Inside, her home was warm and cluttered in the way family houses always are. Children's artwork on the refrigerator, mismatched throw pillows on the sofa, the lingering smell of that morning's pancakes. I'd always envied Catherine's chaotic, love-filled household. James and I had talked about children, but always someday, after his next promotion, after my tenure review, after. Now there would be no after for us. I settled into the guest room, placing my overnight bag on a chair by the window. My phone buzzed again. Another text from James. I'm at the house. Where are all my things? Where are you? Catherine must have heard the notification. She appeared in the doorway. Is that him again? I nodded. Let me handle it, she said, holding out her hand for my phone. I hesitated only briefly before handing it over. Catherine had always been the protective older sister, the one who confronted neighborhood bullies on my behalf, who vetted my prom dates with terrifying thoroughness. Of course, she would step between me and James now. He wants to know where his things are, I told her. Catherine typed a reply, her expression grim. I've told him I'm at the house, and his belongings are in the front hall. He can pick them up and leave the house key. Any attempt to talk to you will go through me. Thank you, I said, suddenly exhausted again. The adrenaline that had carried me through the confrontation at the restaurant and the long night of packing had finally depleted, leaving me hollow. Get some rest, Catherine urged. I'll handle everything else. I must have fallen asleep almost immediately, because when I woke, the room was bathed in late afternoon shadows. For one merciful moment, I didn't remember. And then it all came crashing back. The restaurant, Rebecca's tear-streaked face, Daniel's cold fury, James's pathetic attempts at justification. I checked my phone. 3:30. James would have collected his things by now. I had 5 missed calls and a text from Catherine. All done. He's gone. Left the key as instructed. Call when you wake up. There was also a message from an unknown number. This is Daniel Matthews. I got your number from your university directory. Can we talk? No pressure if you're not up for it. I stared at the message, unsure how to respond. What more was there to say? What possible comfort could we offer each other? Yet something made me reply, "I'm staying at my sister's tonight. Maybe coffee tomorrow?" His response came quickly. "That works. Perkins Cafe on Main Street? 11 a.m.? I'll be there," I texted back. I called Catherine, who confirmed that James had indeed collected his things. "He tried to leave a letter for you," she said. "I told him any communication needs to go through the lawyers from now on." Was he? How did he seem? I couldn't help asking, hating myself for still caring. "Like a man who suddenly realized he's lost everything valuable in his life," Catherine replied without sympathy. "Too little, too late." That evening, we ordered takeout and watched mindless comedy movies, deliberately avoiding anything romantic. Catherine opened a bottle of wine but didn't push when I declined a glass. Alcohol wouldn't dull this kind of pain. It would only make it more confusing, more overwhelming. "Do you want to talk about it?" she asked during a lull between films. "Not yet," I said. "It still doesn't feel real." "It will," she warned gently. "And when it does, I'm here." I nodded, grateful beyond words for her steady presence. Sunday morning arrived with unwelcome clarity. I woke early, my body still on its teaching schedule despite the emotional chaos. Catherine was already in the kitchen, sipping coffee and reading the news on her tablet. "You're meeting the other husband today?" she asked as I joined her at the table. "Daniel," I confirmed. "At 11. She gave me a questioning look. "Are you sure that's a good idea?" "Honestly, I have no idea. But we're the only two people who understand exactly what the other is going through." Catherine nodded slowly. "Just be careful. People can be unpredictable when they're hurting." He seemed composed, considering the circumstances. "So do you," she pointed out. "Doesn't mean you're not falling apart inside." She had a point. I'd maintained a facade of control since the moment I'd seen that text message on James's phone, but beneath the surface, I was shattered, barely holding the pieces together. Perhaps Daniel was the same, outwardly functional but inwardly devastated. At 10:30, I borrowed Catherine's car and drove to Perkins Cafe, a quiet place near the university where I sometimes graded papers. Sunday morning was busy with the after-church crowd, but I found a small table in the corner, partially screened by a large potted plant, perfect for a conversation neither of us wanted overheard. Daniel arrived precisely at 11, looking as exhausted as I felt. The composed architect from Friday night had been replaced by a man who had clearly slept as poorly as I had. His hair was uncombed, his eyes shadowed by dark circles, his clothes rumpled as if he'd grabbed whatever was closest. "Thank you for coming," he said, sliding into the chair opposite mine. "I wasn't sure you would." "I wasn't sure either," I admitted. He ordered black coffee when the server approached, and I asked for the same. We sat in awkward silence until our drinks arrived, neither quite knowing how to begin this strangest of conversations. "How are you holding up?" he finally asked. I almost laughed at the absurdity of the question. "About as well as you'd expect." "You?" "I haven't been home yet," he confessed. "I checked into a hotel Friday night, couldn't face the apartment, knowing she's been there, making plans with him, probably talking about me behind my back." I understood completely. I packed all of James's things and had my sister supervise while he picked them up. I couldn't bear to see him. Daniel stared into his coffee. "Rebecca's been calling non-stop, texting, emailing, saying she made a mistake, begging for a chance to explain." "James, too," I said. "I've ignored all of it." "I haven't," Daniel admitted. "I answered once, told her to have her things out by the end of the week and leave the key with the doorman." His voice hardened. "She started crying, saying I was being cruel, that we needed to talk this through. Can you believe that? She thought I was being cruel." The bitter irony wasn't lost on me. "They want absolution," I said. "They want us to forgive them, so they can feel better about what they did." "Well, they can go to hell," Daniel said quietly, then looked immediately embarrassed by his outburst. "Sorry, I'm not usually like this. No need to apologize. If anyone's earned the right to anger, it's us." We fell silent again, sipping our coffee, two strangers united by betrayal. I keep thinking about the signs I missed, Daniel finally said. The late nights at the office, the work trips that seemed to multiply, the new clothes, the way she'd take her phone everywhere, even to the bathroom. He shook his head. I feel like such a fool. Me too, I admitted. James started going to the gym regularly. He never cared about fitness before, and the cologne change, and being protective of his phone. I traced the rim of my coffee cup with one finger. The worst part is, I noticed, I just chose not to see it. Daniel nodded in recognition. It's easier to believe the lie sometimes. Until it isn't, I added. What are you going to do now? He asked. It was the question I'd been avoiding. The future I couldn't yet imagine. File for divorce, obviously. Probably sell the house. Too many memories. Focus on work for a while. I attempted a smile. Exciting plans, right? Better than mine, Daniel replied, which consist entirely of don't fall apart completely. For the first time in days, I felt a genuine laugh bubble up. That's on my list, too. Daniel smiled, and despite the circumstances, I noticed how it transformed his face, softening the hard edges of grief that had settled there. In another universe, one where we hadn't met under the worst possible circumstances, I might have found him attractive. The thought made me uncomfortable, and I quickly pushed it away. I should probably go, I said, checking my watch. My sister will be wondering where I am. Of course, Daniel said, reaching for the check. Let me get this. You don't have to. Please, he insisted. It's just coffee. I nodded, gathering my purse. Thank you. As we walked to the parking lot, an awkward moment hung between us. What was the appropriate goodbye for people in our situation? A handshake seemed too formal, a hug too intimate. Will you be okay? Daniel asked, solving the dilemma by maintaining his distance. Eventually, I replied, surprising myself with the certainty in my voice. You? Eventually, he echoed. We parted with a simple nod, each returning to our separate lives, our parallel griefs. But as I drove back to Catherine's house, I felt slightly less alone, slightly less adrift. Someone else in the world understood exactly what I was going through. It wasn't much, but in that moment, it was enough. When I returned, Catherine was in the kitchen preparing lunch. How was it? She asked cautiously. Strange, I admitted, but helpful, I think. He's going through the same thing. She nodded, chopping vegetables with methodical precision. Just be careful, Mel. Shared trauma can create connections that aren't always healthy. It was just coffee, I protested. I know, she said gently. I'm just saying, watch yourself. You're vulnerable right now. I didn't argue, though her warning seemed premature. Daniel and I had barely spoken for an hour. We were hardly on the verge of making the same mistake our spouses had. That afternoon, I called the university and requested emergency personal leave for the coming week. My department chair, Dr. Elizabeth Winters, was understanding without requiring details. Take the time you need, Melissa. Your classes are covered. One small mercy in a sea of complications. By evening, I'd made a decision. I'm going home tonight, I told Catherine as we cleaned up after dinner. I need to face it sooner rather than later. She frowned. Are you sure? You're welcome to stay longer. I'm sure. The longer I avoid it, the harder it will be. Then I'm coming with you, she insisted. Just for tonight, to make sure you're settled. I didn't argue. The thought of returning to the empty house alone was more daunting than I wanted to admit. The house was exactly as we'd left it, yet it felt fundamentally changed, as if the walls themselves knew that half of the couple who had lived there was gone. Catherine helped me check all the rooms, confirming James had taken only what we'd packed for him. In the master bedroom, his side of the closet gaped empty, a physical manifestation of his absence. Do you want me to stay in the guest room? Catherine asked, as I stood staring at the vacant space. I shook my head. No, I need to get used to being here alone. But thank you. Call me any time, she said, hugging me tightly before leaving. Day or night, I mean it. After she left, the silence descended again, thick and oppressive. I moved through the house, turning on lights, playing music, creating ambient noise to fill the void. In the kitchen, I opened the refrigerator and found it still stocked with James's favorites: the artisanal cheese he liked, the craft beer he'd developed a taste for recently, the premium orange juice he insisted was worth the extra cost, more remnants to purge. As I closed the refrigerator door, my eye caught on something. A small yellow post-it note stuck to the side of the fruit bowl. James's handwriting, hastily scrawled, "I'm sorry, please call me, we can fix this." He must have left it during the pickup, despite Catherine's vigilance. The presumption of it, the audacity to suggest our marriage could be fixed after what he'd done, ignited a spark of anger that had been buried beneath the shock and grief. I crumpled the note and threw it away with more force than necessary. "No, James," I said aloud to the empty kitchen. "We can't." Monday morning arrived with unwelcome clarity. I woke before my alarm, disoriented by the emptiness beside me where James should have been. For 10 years, I'd grown accustomed to his presence, the warmth of his body, the rhythm of his breathing, the way he'd reach for me in his sleep. Now there was only vacant space, cold sheets, silence. I forced myself out of bed. If I was going to rebuild my life, I needed to start with structure, with routine, shower, coffee, breakfast. Normal actions to anchor me in this new, abnormal reality. I dressed in comfortable clothes, yoga pants and a loose sweater, with nowhere to go but through the motions of existence. My phone had accumulated more messages overnight. 3 from James, which I deleted without reading. 1 from Catherine checking in, and 1 from Daniel. "Just wanted to make sure you're doing okay. Yesterday helped. Thank you." I hesitated before replying, 1 foot in front of the other. "That's all we can do right now." His response came quickly. "Exactly. Let me know if you need anything." The offer was kind but vague. What could either of us possibly need from the other? We were strangers connected by circumstance, by parallel pain. Yet, I found myself appreciating the gesture, the acknowledgement that someone understood precisely what I was experiencing. By mid-morning, I'd compiled a to-do list that felt both overwhelming and inadequate. Contact divorce attorney, change locks, close joint accounts, update will. Each item a surgical cut severing another connection to James, to our shared past. The precision of it was almost comforting. Clear, actionable steps toward a future I couldn't yet imagine. I started with the locks. The locksmith arrived promptly at 11. A middle-aged man with kind eyes who didn't ask questions when I requested all external locks be changed. He worked efficiently, explaining each new feature as he installed electronic keypads on the front and back doors. "The system can store up to 8 different access codes," he explained, demonstrating the programming. "You can assign temporary codes for visitors or service providers that expire after a set time." I nodded, thinking how James would have appreciated this technology, how we would have discussed which friends deserved permanent codes. Now I programmed just 1. For myself. I could add Catherine later. No one else needed access to my space, my sanctuary. After the locksmith left, I called the law firm Catherine had recommended. The receptionist connected me to Jessica Winters, a divorce attorney specializing in faculty cases. Her voice was warm but businesslike as she outlined the process ahead. "The good news, if we can call it that, is that infidelity works in your favor in this state," she explained. "If you have evidence of the affair, we can use it to negotiate a more favorable settlement." Evidence. I had screenshots of messages, confirmation of the apartment deposit, hotel receipts found in his belongings, a forensic record of betrayal, meticulously documented during those 3 sleepless nights before the confrontation. "I have enough," I assured her. "Excellent. Now, regarding assets, the house, investments, retirement accounts, we spent 45 minutes discussing the clinical dismantling of my marriage, reducing 10 years to spreadsheets and percentages. I took detailed notes, focusing on the practicalities rather than the emotions roiling beneath the surface. When we finished, I had a clear timeline, a list of documents to gather, and a follow-up appointment scheduled for Thursday. Progress. One item crossed off my list. The bank was next. I drove to our local branch, where we'd opened our first joint account shortly after the wedding. The personal banker, a young woman named Tara, maintained a neutral expression as I explained my situation and requested separate accounts. "Of course, Dr. Adams. We can take care of that right away," she typed efficiently, asking occasional clarifying questions. "And the joint credit cards? Cancel them all," I said without hesitation. "I'll open a new one in my name only." By 1 o'clock, I had new accounts, new cards on the way, and a significantly reduced bank balance. I'd taken exactly half of our joint savings, not a penny more, despite Jessica's advice that I could justifiably claim more given the circumstances. As I walked back to my car, my phone rang. James, again. His 7th call since Friday night. For a moment, I nearly answered, some masochistic part of me curious about what possible explanation he could offer. Instead, I silenced the call and drove home, stopping at the grocery store to replace everything in the refrigerator. New food, new toiletries, new beginning. At home, I methodically emptied the refrigerator of James's favorites, tossing beer bottles into the recycling with satisfying clinks, donating unopened specialty items to my elderly neighbor who always appreciated free groceries. I scrubbed every surface until the kitchen gleamed, erasing fingerprints, water spots, any physical evidence that he had ever been there. By evening, exhaustion overtook me. Not just physical fatigue, but emotional depletion. I ordered delivery for dinner, unable to summon the energy to cook for one. As I picked at my pad thai, my phone lit up with a text from an unknown number. "Melissa, it's Rebecca Wilson. Please don't block this number. I know I'm the last person you want to hear from, but I need to talk to you. Please." I stared at the message, a surge of anger rising in my chest. The audacity of her, reaching out as if we could have some civilized conversation, as if she hadn't helped destroy the foundation of my life. I typed a response without thinking. "There is absolutely nothing you could say that I have any interest in hearing." Her reply came instantly. "I understand your anger, but there are things you should know. About James, about the situation. Please, just 15 minutes." I laughed bitterly at my empty kitchen. The situation. Such a bloodless word for such devastation. I typed again. "The situation is perfectly clear. You and my husband had an affair. You planned a future together. You lied to my face, and to Daniel's. What could possibly require further explanation?" A long pause before her next message. "It's more complicated than you think. James isn't who you believe he is. Neither am I. Please, meet me for coffee. Public place? Your choice. Just 15 minutes." A cold weight settled in my stomach. What did she mean? James wasn't who I believed? After 10 years of marriage, I knew exactly who James Adams was. Or at least, I thought I had until last Tuesday night. Curiosity warred with self-preservation. Did I really want to hear more painful details? Could anything she said possibly matter now? Yet the specificity of her warning nagged at me. "James isn't who you believe he is." 10 minutes, I finally replied. "Tomorrow, 10 a.m., Starbucks on University Avenue. If you're 1 minute late, I'm leaving. I'll be there, thank you." I put down my phone, appetite completely gone. What possible revelation could be worth this meeting? And why did I agree to it? The rational part of me knew nothing could justify their betrayal, yet some deeper instinct pushed me toward this conversation, toward whatever truth Rebecca thought I needed to hear. Sleep evaded me that night. I tossed in the too large bed, mind racing with possibilities. What didn't I know about James? Financial problems? Health issues? A secret family? Each scenario seemed more far-fetched than the last, yet something in Rebecca's urgency had seemed genuine. Morning brought no clarity, only a headache, and the grim determination to get through this final confrontation. I dressed carefully, professional, composed, armored in a crisp white blouse and tailored black pants. If I had to face my husband's mistress again, I would do so looking unaffected, unbroken. I arrived at Starbucks 15 minutes early, claiming a table in the corner with good sight lines to both entrances. I ordered a black coffee, not because I wanted it, but to justify my occupation of the table. Students and faculty from the university filled the cafe. Many faces I recognized vaguely but couldn't name. I kept my sunglasses on, hoping to avoid conversation. The last thing I needed was well-meaning colleagues asking about James or my unexpected absence from campus. Rebecca arrived 5 minutes early, looking nothing like the polished woman from the restaurant. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, her face free of makeup, dark circles prominent under her eyes. She wore jeans and a plain sweater, a stark contrast to her usual professional attire. She spotted me immediately and approached, clutching a large envelope. "Thank you for coming," she said, taking the seat across from me. 10 minutes, I reminded her, setting a timer on my phone and placing it on the table between us. "Go." She took a deep breath. "First, I need to say how deeply sorry I am. What James and I did to you and Daniel was unforgivable. If you ask me here for apologies, you're wasting both our time," I interrupted. "I didn't," she said quickly. "I asked you here because you deserve to know the truth, the whole truth, not just about the affair, but about James himself." She pushed the envelope toward me. "Everything is in here. Financial records, emails, text messages, things I discovered accidentally at first, then deliberately as I became suspicious." I didn't touch the envelope. Suspicious of what, exactly? Rebecca glanced around, lowering her voice. "James isn't just cheating on you with me. There are others. At least 2 that I know of. And there's more. Embezzlement from the company. Fake client accounts. Money being funneled somewhere I can't trace." I stared at her, stunned into silence. Of all the scenarios I'd imagined, this hadn't been one of them. "I know how this sounds," she continued, her words tumbling out rapidly now. "Like I'm trying to shift blame or paint myself as a victim too. I'm not. I made terrible choices. I betrayed Daniel and I hurt you. But when I realized what else was happening, I knew I had to tell you." "Why?" I managed to ask. "Why tell me anything?" "Because he's dangerous, Melissa." Her voice dropped even lower. "Not physically, maybe, but he destroys lives. He's a predator. He targeted me specifically because of my position in the company, my access to accounts. When I threatened to end things after I discovered the other women, he threatened to frame me for the financial discrepancies." I felt dizzy, the cafe seeming to tilt around me. This is insane. James is many things, but he's not a criminal." "Look at the evidence," she urged, pushing the envelope closer. "Bank statements, emails to the other women, documentation of wire transfers to offshore accounts. It's all there." My timer chimed, startling us both. 10 minutes gone in what felt like seconds. "I need to go," I said automatically, reaching for my purse. "Take the envelope," Rebecca insisted. "Read it. Verify it independently. Show it to a lawyer. You don't have to believe me, but please, protect yourself." I hesitated, then took the envelope, tucking it into my bag without opening it. "Why are you really doing this, Rebecca? Guilty conscience? Trying to salvage something with Daniel by making James the bigger villain?" Pain flashed across her face. "Daniel won't speak to me. He's filed for divorce. The apartment is on the market. My life as I knew it is over, and I deserve that. She met my eyes directly. "I'm doing this because it's the right thing to do. Because despite everything, I don't want to see you hurt more than I've already hurt you." I stood, needing to escape the intensity of her gaze, the sincerity that threatened to complicate my clean narrative of betrayal. "I have to go. Be careful," she called after me as I walked away. "He won't take the divorce easily. He has too much to lose." Outside, I gulped fresh air, trying to steady my racing heart. The envelope seemed to burn through my bag. its contents potentially more destructive than anything I'd imagined. Part of me wanted to throw it away unopened, to reject whatever new pain it might contain. But the professor in me, the researcher, the seeker of truth, wouldn't allow it. I drove home in a daze, the envelope on the passenger seat like a ticking bomb. Inside the house, I placed it on the kitchen table and stared at it for long minutes before finally opening it. What I found inside changed everything. Bank statements showing regular transfers from company accounts to a private account in the Cayman Islands. Email exchanges with two women, not just Rebecca, containing the same romantic promises, the same future plans. Photographs of James with another woman entering a hotel in San Diego. During a weekend, he'd told me he was fishing with colleagues. Documentation of a life insurance policy on me that I'd never known about, taken out 3 years ago with James as the sole beneficiary. My hands shook as I spread the papers across the table, connecting dots I'd never seen before. The business trips that multiplied after he received a promotion, giving him more financial authority. The new friends whose names I knew, but whom I'd never met. The increased life insurance coverage he'd insisted we both needed, just in case. I reached for my phone, hesitated, then called the one person who might understand the seismic shift happening beneath my feet. "Daniel? It's Melissa Adams. I need to talk to you. It's about James and Rebecca, but it's worse than we thought. Much worse." An hour later, Daniel sat across from me at my kitchen table, examining the documents with the methodical precision of an architect assessing structural damage. "The financial records are authentic," he said finally, looking up with troubled eyes. "I recognize the banking formats, the transaction codes. This isn't fabricated." "Why would Rebecca share this?" I asked, still struggling to reconcile the woman I'd confronted at the restaurant with this apparent whistleblower. "It implicates her too. Self-preservation, maybe," Daniel suggested. "Or genuine remorse. Either way, we can't ignore this, Melissa. If James is embezzling funds, if he's involving Rebecca in it, we could both be legally vulnerable as spouses." The thought hadn't occurred to me. "You think we could be implicated?" "I don't know," he admitted, "but we need to protect ourselves. This goes beyond infidelity now." I nodded slowly, a new kind of fear replacing the heartache that had dominated the past few days. "I should call my lawyer." "I think we both should," Daniel agreed, "and possibly the police." "Oh, the police," I repeated numbly. How had my life come to this? A week ago, I was a university professor with a seemingly solid marriage. Now I was contemplating reporting my husband for financial crimes while divorcing him for infidelity. Daniel reached across the table, briefly touching my hand. "You don't have to do this alone, Melissa. We're in this together now, whether we like it or not." The simple human contact, the first I'd experienced since Catherine's hug goodbye, nearly undid me. I pulled my hand away, afraid I might shatter if I accepted even this small comfort. "I'll call Jessica," I said, focusing on practical steps. "She should see these before we do anything else." Daniel nodded, gathering the papers and returning them to the envelope. "I'll contact my attorney as well. We should compare notes afterward." As he prepared to leave, an awkward moment stretched between us, similar to our coffee shop goodbye. This time, however, something had shifted. We weren't just strangers connected by betrayal anymore, but reluctant allies against a threat neither of us fully understood. "Thank you for coming," I said simply. "Thanks for calling me," he replied. "I'd rather know, even though it's overwhelming." "Overwhelming," I echoed with a hollow laugh. "That's one word for it." After Daniel left, I sat alone in my kitchen, surrounded by the remnants of a life I no longer recognized. Beyond the window, the afternoon light painted my backyard in gentle spring colors. The flowering dogwood James and I had planted on our first anniversary, the herb garden I'd meticulously maintained, the patio furniture where we'd hosted countless summer barbecues. Everything looked exactly the same, yet nothing was. The ground had shifted beneath my feet, revealing not just cracks, but chasms where I'd thought solid foundations stood. I called Jessica's office and left an urgent message explaining I needed to see her immediately. Then I did something I'd been avoiding. I checked my university email. Among the routine faculty announcements and student questions was a message from James sent just an hour earlier. "Melissa, I know you're ignoring my calls and texts. I understand your anger, but there's something urgent we need to discuss regarding our finances. Please contact me as soon as possible. This isn't about us or our marriage. It's about protecting our assets." James. A chill ran through me. He knew. Somehow, he knew that Rebecca had reached out, that the financial evidence was now in my possession. I forwarded the email to Jessica, adding a note about the documents Rebecca had provided and my conversation with Daniel. Then I did what I should have done days ago. I blocked James's number, deleted his email address from my contacts, and removed him from all my social media accounts. Whatever came next, whatever revelations awaited, I needed to protect myself, not just emotionally, but legally and financially as well. As darkness fell, I moved through the house, turning on lights, trying to dispel the shadows that seemed to grow from every corner. For the first time since discovering James's betrayal, I felt something beyond grief and anger. I felt afraid, not just of losing what I'd had, but of what might still be taken from me. I checked all the doors and windows twice, grateful for the new locks installed that morning. Then I poured myself a glass of wine, my first since the restaurant confrontation, and called Catherine. "I need to tell you something," I began when she answered, "and I need you not to panic, but I might need a place to stay again, just until I figure some things out." "What's happened?" The instant concern in her voice was both comforting and alarming. "It's complicated," I said, understating the situation dramatically. "But it turns out James might be involved in something illegal at his company." Catherine's sharp intake of breath carried clearly through the phone. "Illegal how?" "Financial improprieties. Possibly fraud. I have documents, evidence." I took a sip of wine, steadying myself. "I've contacted my attorney, but I'm worried about staying here alone until we sort this out." "Pack a bag," Catherine said immediately. "I'm coming to get you." "No," I protested, "not tonight. I have the new locks, the security system. I'll be fine until morning. I just wanted you to know what's happening." She wasn't easily convinced, but eventually agreed to wait until morning, after I promised to keep my phone by my bed and call immediately if anything concerned me. After we hung up, I stood in my living room, surveying the space that had once represented safety and comfort. Now it felt like a museum of a life that no longer existed. Every object a reminder of something lost, or, worse, something that had never been real at all. That night, I slept with a chair propped under my bedroom doorknob, a precaution that would have seemed absurd just a week ago. My dreams were chaotic. James pursuing me through endless corridors, Rebecca trying to hand me papers that dissolved into ashes, Daniel building walls that crumbled as soon as they were complete. I woke repeatedly, each time requiring several disorienting moments to remember why fear was my first conscious emotion. Morning couldn't come soon enough. The attorney's office was a sanctuary of order amid the chaos my life had become. Jessica Winter's private conference room featured leather chairs, tasteful artwork, and windows overlooking the city skyline, a setting designed to convey stability and control, qualities I desperately needed. "These documents are concerning," Jessica said, reviewing the papers spread across the polished mahogany table. Beside her sat Raymond Chen, a forensic accountant she'd brought in to evaluate the financial evidence. Across from me was Daniel, accompanied by his own attorney, a silver-haired man named Martin Goldstein, who specialized in both divorce and white-collar crime, a combination that had suddenly become relevant to our situation. "Concerning is an understatement," Raymond interjected, pointing to a series of transaction records. "These transfers follow a classic embezzlement pattern, small enough to avoid immediate detection, but consistent enough to accumulate significant amounts over time. And you had no knowledge of these accounts? Jessica asked me for the third time. None, I confirmed. I handled our household finances, but James managed his own business accounts and investments. He always said it was simpler that way, since he understood the tax implications better. Martin Goldstein nodded sympathetically. A common tactic: create a compartmentalized financial structure where the spouse has neither access nor visibility. What about you, Mr. Matthews? Jessica turned to Daniel. Were you aware of any unusual financial activities involving your wife? Daniel shook his head. Rebecca managed our joint accounts, but I handled my own architectural firm's finances. We maintained separate retirement accounts and investments from before our marriage. He looked down at his hands. I thought it was about independence. Now I wonder if it was about hiding things. Based on what we're seeing here, Raymond said, tapping the statements, both James Adams and Rebecca Wilson have been involved in diverting funds from North Star Marketing for at least 18 months. The total amount appears to exceed $2 million. The figure hung in the air like a physical presence. $2 million. The equivalent of 20 years of my professor's salary. What does this mean for us, legally? I asked, voicing the question that had kept me awake for 2 nights straight. Jessica and Martin exchanged glances before she answered. That depends on several factors. First, we need to establish that you had no knowledge of or involvement in these activities. The fact that the accounts were carefully hidden from you both helps your case. Second, we need to formally report this to the proper authorities. You mean the police? Daniel said, his voice flat. Initially, yes, Martin confirmed. But given the amounts involved and the interstate nature of some transactions, this will likely become a federal matter involving the FBI and SEC. My stomach twisted painfully. FBI, SEC. These weren't terms I'd ever expected to associate with my life, my marriage. What about the divorce proceedings? I asked, trying to focus on the practical aspects, the things I could control. We'll need to accelerate them, Jessica advised. File immediately and request emergency orders to freeze any joint assets that might be at risk. Given the evidence of infidelity combined with potential financial crimes, we can petition for a more favorable distribution. More importantly, we need to legally distance you from any liability. Daniel leaned forward. And what about our safety? Melissa received an email from James that seemed threatening, like he knew we were on to him. That's another reason to involve law enforcement quickly, Martin said. If Mr. Adams realizes his financial schemes are exposed, there's no telling how he might react. We should discuss protection orders, Jessica added. Given the circumstances, judges are usually amenable. The meeting continued for another hour, the attorneys outlining a coordinated strategy to protect Daniel and me legally while providing evidence to authorities. Throughout the discussion, I maintained a composed exterior, asking relevant questions, signing necessary documents. Inside, however, I was screaming. How had my life become this legal thriller nightmare? How had I shared a bed for 10 years with someone capable of such calculated deception? As we prepared to leave, Raymond pulled me aside. Professor Adams, I noticed something in these records that might interest you personally. The life insurance policy on you, it was substantially increased 6 months ago. The beneficiary was changed from both your names to James alone. A chill ran through me. What are you suggesting? Raymond chose his words carefully. I'm not suggesting anything specific, but in my experience, unusual insurance adjustments combined with financial crimes can sometimes indicate escalating risk factors. You think he might have been planning something beyond financial fraud? My voice sounded distant, as if someone else was speaking. I think it's worth mentioning to the authorities, Raymond replied diplomatically. Better safe than sorry. Nice, I nodded mechanically, thanking him for his candor. As I joined Daniel in the hallway, his expression told me he'd received similar warnings. Your guy mentioned the insurance policy too? I asked quietly, as we waited for the elevator. Daniel nodded. and a recent credit card charge for a consultation with a law firm specializing in extradition treaties. Martin thinks they might have been planning to flee the country. The elevator arrived with a cheerful ding that seemed obscenely inappropriate for our conversation. We rode down in silence, each processing the implications of what we'd learned. In the lobby, Daniel hesitated. "I don't think either of us should be alone right now," he said finally. "At least, not until the police are formally involved. Would you like to get some lunch? Just to talk through next steps?" The offer was practical rather than social, yet I found myself grateful for it. "Yes, that would be helpful. Thank you." We found a quiet cafe a block from the law office, selecting a corner table that allowed us to see all entrances. A week ago, such paranoia would have seemed absurd. Now it felt necessary. "I keep thinking about how I missed it," Daniel said after we'd ordered. All the signs were there. The late nights, the secretive phone calls, the changing passwords on her laptop. "We trusted them," I replied simply. "That's not a character flaw, Daniel. It's what people in committed relationships are supposed to do." He sighed, running a hand through his hair, a gesture I'd noticed he made when particularly stressed. "My firm has a major project presentation tomorrow. I haven't been able to focus on it at all. How do you just continue with normal life after something like this?" "You compartmentalize," I said, drawing on years of academic discipline. "Set specific times to deal with the crisis, then force yourself to focus elsewhere when necessary. It's not perfect, but it helps." Daniel nodded thoughtfully. Architect brain understands compartmentalization. We deal with complex systems all the time, separating them into manageable components. Exactly. Right now, we have lawyers handling the legal component. Tonight, I'll prepare for my classes next week. Tomorrow, you'll focus on your presentation. We keep functioning. "And when do we process the emotional fallout?" he asked, his voice softening. "I'll let you know when I figure that part out," I admitted with a wry smile. Our food arrived, and we ate in companionable silence, two people united by circumstance rather than choice. Despite everything, I found Daniel's presence oddly comforting, perhaps because he was the only person who truly understood the unique hell I was experiencing. After lunch, we parted with an awkward handshake and promises to keep each other informed about the legal proceedings. I returned to my sister's house, where I'd been staying since the revelation about James's financial crimes. Catherine had converted her home office into a makeshift bedroom for me, insisting I remain with her until the situation stabilized. "How did it go?" she asked when I arrived, setting aside the manuscript she'd been editing. "About as well as could be expected," I replied, sinking onto her sofa. "We're filing reports with the authorities tomorrow. The attorneys think this will become a federal case." Catherine's expression tightened with concern. "I still can't believe this is happening. James always seemed so normal." "Apparently, that was his greatest talent," I said bitterly. "Seeming normal while living a triple life." That evening, Catherine's family created a buffer against the darkness threatening to overwhelm me. Her children, oblivious to the adult drama, insisted I join their board game marathon. Her husband, Robert, grilled steaks and maintained a steady stream of conversation about anything except my situation. For a few hours, I existed in a bubble of ordinary family life, a reminder that such things still existed somewhere in the world. After dinner, I excused myself to prepare for my return to teaching. Catherine had brought my lecture notes and materials from my office, allowing me to work remotely. I spread them across the guest bed, forcing myself to focus on advertising ethics and media analysis rather than betrayal and fraud. The irony wasn't lost on me. I taught students about ethical practices while my own husband engaged in their antithesis. My phone buzzed with a text from Daniel. "Filed police report this afternoon. Detective Wilson, taking lead. They'll contact you tomorrow for statement. Sleep well." I texted back a simple, "Thank you," before returning to my notes. The process had begun. There was no turning back now. The following days passed in a blur of legal meetings, police interviews, and attempts at normalcy. I returned to teaching, standing before my students discussing advertising principles while carefully compartmentalizing the chaos of my personal life. Daniel and I exchanged regular updates, our communications evolving from awkward formality to something approaching friendship. 1 week after our meeting with the attorneys, the situation escalated dramatically. I was in my afternoon seminar when my phone vibrated repeatedly, multiple messages arriving in quick succession. I waited until the students were engaged in group work before checking it. 3 missed calls from Daniel, 2 from Jessica. 1 text message. James and Rebecca have disappeared. Call me immediately. I excused myself, citing a family emergency, and stepped into the hallway to call Daniel. What's happening? I asked without preamble when he answered. Police went to arrest them this morning, he explained, his voice tense. James wasn't at his apartment. Rebecca wasn't at her sister's, where she'd been staying. Both their passports are gone. The FBI has issued alerts at airports and border crossings. My knees weakened, forcing me to lean against the wall for support. They ran. Together, Daniel confirmed. A witness saw them leaving James's building with suitcases last night. They took a taxi to the airport. Do they know where they were heading? Not confirmed. But the investigators found searches for flights to countries without extradition treaties on James's work computer. I closed my eyes, processing this latest development. Part of me felt relieved. With James gone, the immediate threat to my safety diminished. Yet, another part felt cheated of closure, of justice. There's more, Daniel continued hesitantly. They found evidence at James's apartment suggesting they'd been planning this for months, including information about us. What kind of information? I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know. Surveillance photos, notes about our routines, our vulnerabilities. Melissa, they were monitoring both of us since before we discovered the affair. The implications hit me like a physical blow. They hadn't just been hiding their relationship and financial crimes. They'd been actively tracking us, studying us, perhaps even setting us up in some way. I need to see you, I said impulsively. Can you meet me? I don't think I should be alone right now. I'll come to the university, Daniel replied without hesitation. Text me your building and office number. 30 minutes later, we sat in my cramped faculty office, the door locked, blinds drawn. Daniel had brought copies of the police reports, which detailed the evidence found in James's apartment. Offshore account information, fake identification documents, and most disturbingly, the surveillance materials focused on us. They think it was about liability, Daniel explained, referencing his conversation with the detective. If either of us had discovered the financial fraud, we could have exposed them. They needed to know our movements, our habits, to stay one step ahead. And the life insurance policy on me? I asked, voicing the question that had haunted me for days. Daniel hesitated. The investigators are looking into that angle seriously. The policy had a clause that would pay double for accidental death. The implication hung heavy in the air between us. My husband of 10 years might have been considering more than just divorce and financial fraud. The thought made me physically ill. Where do we go from here? I asked, struggling to maintain composure. Forward, Daniel said simply. One day at a time. The investigators believe they'll be caught eventually. Financial criminals usually are. They leave too many digital footprints. And in the meantime, do we just wait? We rebuild, he suggested. We focus on what we can control. For me, that's my firm, my projects. For you, your teaching, your research. We don't let them take anything more from us than they already have. His words resonated with the determination that had been building within me. I nodded slowly. You're right. They've taken enough. Later that evening, as spring twilight settled over the city, Daniel and I walked through the botanical gardens near campus. We hadn't planned it. He'd offered to walk me to my car, and somehow we'd ended up taking the scenic route, both reluctant to return to our respective empty homes. I've been thinking about selling my condo, Daniel said as we paused near a flowering cherry tree. Too many memories, too many questions about what was real and what wasn't. I feel the same way about the house, I admitted. "I've been staying with Catherine, but I can't impose on her forever. I need to start fresh somewhere." "It's strange," he said, watching cherry blossoms drift in the gentle breeze. "A month ago, I thought I knew exactly what my future looked like. Now I can't see past next week." "Maybe that's not entirely bad," I suggested. "There's a certain freedom in having to reinvent yourself, in being forced to reconsider everything." Daniel glanced at me, a hint of surprise in his expression. "That's remarkably optimistic, given everything." I shrugged. "Not optimism exactly. Survival instinct, maybe. I refuse to let what they did define the rest of my life." "I like that perspective," he said quietly. "Mind if I borrow it?" "It's all yours," I replied, with the first genuine smile I'd managed in weeks. As we continued walking, our hands brushed accidentally. Neither of us acknowledged it, but neither pulled away either. We were two people adrift in the same storm, finding momentary anchor in each other's presence. 3 months later, I stood in my new apartment, surrounded by moving boxes and the few pieces of furniture I'd kept from my previous life. The rest I'd sold or donated, finding unexpected liberation in shedding possessions that carried too many memories. The divorce had been finalized with remarkable speed, given James's absence and the overwhelming evidence of his wrongdoing. The financial investigation continued, but my personal legal entanglements had been largely resolved. I'd moved across town, closer to the university, but in a neighborhood I'd never visited with James. My new space was smaller but brighter, with large windows overlooking a community garden. I'd painted the walls myself, soft blues and greens that had no connection to my previous decorating choices. Every decision, from furniture placement to kitchen organization, was made solely according to my preferences. After years of compromise and, I now realized, subordination of my needs to James's, the freedom was intoxicating. The doorbell rang, interrupting my unpacking. I opened it to find Daniel holding a small potted plant and a bottle of wine. "Housewarming," he explained with a smile. "The plant is a peace lily, supposedly impossible to kill, even for people who spend too many hours at work and forget to water things." "Perfect for me, then," I laughed, accepting both gifts. "Come in." It's still chaos, but there are 2 chairs and clean glasses. Daniel had also relocated, trading his downtown condo for a modest house with a studio space where he could work on architectural models. Like me, he'd embraced the opportunity to redefine his surroundings. We'd stayed in contact throughout the transition, initially about legal matters, then gradually about more personal subjects. Our shared trauma had evolved into a unique friendship, cautious but genuine, rooted in mutual understanding no one else could provide. "Any news?" he asked as I poured the wine. I knew immediately what he meant. "Nothing concrete. The FBI traced them to Singapore initially, then lost the trail. They think they might be in Indonesia now, but it's all speculative." Daniel nodded, accepting this update with the same resigned patience we'd both developed. "My lawyer says they've frozen more accounts. The money trail keeps expanding." We'd learned to discuss these updates clinically, without allowing them to dominate our interactions. It was another form of compartmentalization, acknowledging the ongoing situation without giving it power over our present. "How's the Clark project coming along?" I asked, changing the subject to his current architectural commission. Daniel's expression brightened as he described the sustainable housing development he was designing. His passion for his work had been his salvation, just as my teaching had been mine. We'd both thrown ourselves into our professions, finding purpose and forward momentum in productive creation. As evening settled, we ordered takeout and sat on cushions on my living room floor, using a moving box as a makeshift table. There was something youthful about the improvisation, reminiscent of first apartments and fresh starts. "Do you ever wonder about the parallel universe?" Daniel asked suddenly. "The one where none of this happened? Where we're still in our marriages, oblivious to everything?" I considered the question carefully. "Sometimes, But then I think that version of me would still be living a lie, just without knowing it. There's something valuable about truth, even when it's painful. Truth as liberation. Daniel nodded. I've been thinking about that too. As horrible as this whole experience has been, at least now I'm living authentically, making choices based on reality rather than illusion. Exactly. I raised my glass slightly. To authentic lives. To authentic lives, he echoed, touching his glass to mine. Later, as we cleared away our impromptu dinner, our hands brushed again, just as they had in the botanical garden months earlier. This time, however, Daniel didn't pull away. Instead, his fingers lightly encircled my wrist, the touch tentative, questioning. I looked up, meeting his gaze. There was uncertainty there, but also warmth, possibility. We'd both been damaged by betrayal, made wary by deception. Yet somehow, through the shared experience of rebuilding from ruins, we'd found our way to this moment of genuine connection. I'm not ready for anything complicated, I said softly, acknowledging the unspoken question between us. Neither am I, Daniel admitted, but maybe we could take it one day at a time, see where it leads without expectations or pressure. I smiled, turning my hand to clasp his properly. I'd like that. Outside my new windows, the city lights sparkled against the darkening sky. Beyond them, somewhere, James and Rebecca continued their fugitive existence, bound together by lies and crimes. But here in this moment, Daniel and I were choosing something different, a connection based on honesty, on shared healing, on the careful, deliberate building of trust. 1 year ago, I couldn't have imagined the collapse of my marriage or the painful revelations that followed. 6 months ago, I couldn't have pictured myself standing in a new home, holding hands with someone who understood exactly what I'd endured. 3 months ago, I wouldn't have believed I could feel hopeful about the future again. Yet here I stood, my hand in Daniel's, facing forward. The path ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in longer than I could remember, uncertainty felt like possibility rather than threat. We had both survived the worst kind of betrayal, emerging stronger, wiser, and somehow more authentic than before. Whatever came next, whether our tentative connection blossomed into something deeper or simply remained a meaningful friendship, it would be built on truth. And after everything we'd experienced, truth was the most precious foundation we could ask for. One day at a time, I agreed, squeezing his hand gently. Sometimes I realized you have to lose everything you thought you wanted to discover what you truly need. Sometimes the end of one story is merely the beginning of another, one more genuine, more meaningful, and ultimately more fulfilling than you could have imagined.